Vocabulary. Probably the number one thing that holds most people back in their knowledge and study of the Greek language. Why is it so important? What's the thing that holds us back from mastering the vocabulary, and what's the best way of looking at vocabulary and mastering it? In this video, these are the things we're going to look at. Hi, I'm Daryl Burling from Master New Testament Greek, here to help you with the tools, habits, and systems so that you can master the Greek of the New Testament and read it fluently. If that sounds like you, go ahead, hit subscribe to this channel and hit the notify bell to be notified when new videos come out. So why is vocabulary important? Why should we bother with vocabulary? Well, let me read to you just a couple of excerpts from different scholars, Greek professors, and what they say about the importance of vocabulary. Rodney Whitaker, to start off with, just says that learning the meanings of words is necessary for gaining fluency and benefiting the most from Greek. In other words, if you want to really benefit from the Greek language and you want to be able to read the text and benefit from it, you really have to know the words. In fact, if you don't know the words, you're really going to struggle not only to read the text, but even to continue on your Greek. And so Robert Plummer and Benjamin Merkle in Greek for Life, they say the broader one's vocabulary base and the more familiar one is with the grammar of the language, the more likely it is that Greek will be used in one's ministry. So, in other words, if you're not familiar with the vocabulary, your vocabulary is not sufficient to cover enough of the text, you're simply going to get discouraged and ultimately give up. And this is one of the problems with Greek generally, and people who go through seminary and learn Greek and then drop out of seminary or finish seminary, and then they stop doing their vocabulary review, they don't have the classes to prepare for, and so their Greek ultimately disappears. You have to continually be looking at the text, looking at the words to remember what they are. And so again, the better your vocabulary is, the more likely you are to actually continue in Greek. And really to cap that off, William Mounce in his Basics of Biblical Greek simply says if you have to look up every other word, the language loses its charm. And isn't that true? I mean, what fun is it to get a book, to read it, and then to be looking up every other word? So the more of the vocabulary of the New Testament you know, the easier it's going to be to read the New Testament. And don't just take my word for it on this. Let me share with you one of the comments from one of my members of the Master New Testament Greek Mastery membership. He says that having started Master New Testament Greek, he is now no longer frustrated by passages full of unfamiliar vocabulary, sometimes feeling like I'm looking up almost every word. Now I can come to the text with the confidence that I know a basic gloss for every word. This even helps with parsing. It's much more tempting to quickly give up on trying to parse difficult forms if you're unsure if this is a word you actually know. And so it's important to know as much vocabulary as you possibly can when you come to a text of the Greek New Testament. So why is it then, if vocabulary is so helpful and if vocabulary is so important, why is it that it's so hard for us to do it? Why is it that we don't spend more time on vocabulary? And let me give you 4 quick reasons. The first one is just how do you actually go about memorizing that many words? And the traditional approach has been you get bits of paper and go through those, and that's just overwhelming. And so how do I actually do that? It seems to be too big a task. The second one is that it seems to be a very unattractive prospect. That just doesn't seem like a lot of fun to go memorize all those words. It just doesn't seem fun. And really what's the problem is with that it doesn't seem fun is there's no reward in it. Okay, and so if we can solve that reward problem, then we can solve our general approach to vocabulary. And another reason really is just if there's so many words, how do I manage to learn so many words? So if we can solve these problems, then that will help us to master the Greek of the New Testament. So one way that a lot of people have tried to learn vocabulary is simply by reading. And what they really do is they skip the vocabulary acquisition stage and they just open the text of the New Testament and start reading. And that is that they're actually going to use maybe a reader's edition or just look words up every time they see a word they don't know. Either way, you're looking words up. It's just whether it's at the bottom of the page or whether it's in another book. And for some people, this works really well. They can take a text, they can read, and they're just looking at the bottom of the page and so on, and that works really well. One of the challenges with this, of course, is that learning specialists tell us that it takes about 4 successful encounters with a word to be able to read that word fluently. Now, here's the problem with that. It takes 4 successful encounters with that word. Now, a successful encounter is when we look at a word and we recognize it without looking it up. Now, if you're dependent on looking words up, be it at the bottom of the page or in another book, it's just going to be hard to have a successful encounter with a word. Yes, if that word occurs 3 or 4 times in a chapter or even in a book, maybe you can master that word. Or if you don't see it that many times, you're just not going to get the fluency you need. And so you're not going to have those successful encounters as often as you might like in that way. And so for some people, this approach works. Reading, just reading text and learning the words by osmosis, that kind of way, for some readers, that works. The problem with the osmosis approach is that you're reading really, really slowly. And by the time you look, even in a reader's edition, you look at the bottom of the page to look up the word, and then you forget where you were in the text above because you're working so slowly through all the text. It just becomes overwhelming, and you end up trying to figure out, where was I? Where am I? What was I saying? What was the context teaching me? How does all of this flow together? What is the author trying to say in his larger context? And so all of this you often lose just by using a reader's edition, never mind if you're looking words up. On the other hand, the good thing about the osmosis type of approach is that at least you're reading, which means you're getting immediate feedback, you're getting immediate return on the investment of figuring out the words. Okay, so that's the benefit of it. You're getting that reward for the work you're doing. But is there a better way? Well, this is the challenge that I had when I was learning Greek as well. I had exactly the same challenge. I wanted to be able to read the Greek New Testament fluently as I read the English New Testament, without having to look words up, without having to think too deeply about what the word is, by just knowing each verb. So I came up with a system that became Master New Testament Greek, and it really started with vocabulary. The entire Master New Testament Greek system started with, what's the best way to acquire vocabulary so that I can read the New Testament fluently? So here's how it works. Rather than simply read and try and take in the vocabulary as you read, the Master New Testament Greek system switches that around. It has you learn the vocabulary that you're about to read, and then read it, and then repeat reading it. Okay, it's very simple. It's memorize, read, master. Okay, that's the simple approach to it. So rather than work on the basis of occurrences in the Greek New Testament, the Master New Testament Greek approach teaches you the vocabulary for a book at a time. So we start at 1 John, and so for 1 John, you're going to learn the vocabulary one chapter at a time. You're going to learn the vocabulary for 1 John chapter 1, then the vocabulary for 1 John chapter 2, and then the vocabulary for 1 John chapter 3. And of course, while you're learning the vocabulary for 1 John chapter 3, you're already reading 1 John chapter 1 and 2. In fact, you can read that over and over again over a period of a week or so. And then when you get through that first book or the second book or whatever book it is, you don't have to learn those words again because you've already learned them once. So even if they occur in the next book, you've already learned them, so they drop out of the vocabulary for that next book. This means you learn each word one time, just when you need it, and then you continue to review that word so that you continue to retain it in your memory. The other nice thing about this is that by ordering it book by book, you can actually order the books in terms of the difficulty and the number of words there are to learn. So what we do with Master New Testament Greek is we order the books from the easiest book to read, both in terms of syntax and in terms of the number of words in it, all the way through to the most difficult. So we start at the book of 1 John, which is obviously the easiest book to read from a grammatical perspective, from a syntactical perspective, but it's also a very simple book from the point of view of it doesn't have a lot of words to memorize. So it's a pretty simple book to achieve. And then you go on to a slightly more difficult book, and then you allow them to get a little more difficult, not only syntactically, but again in terms of the number of words. So when you go from one book to another, because you've already learned a bunch of words that occur in this next book, in the previous books, then that means those words drop out, and that gives you less words to learn for this new book, so that you're going through particularly the shorter books a lot more quickly. So you can master maybe 5 or 7 books in just a few months. So you've then able to read those books fluently, beginning to end, without looking any words up. Now, how would you do this on a weekly basis? Well, it's very simple. Each week you got 2 things to do. One is you need to add a new set of words to your vocabulary every week. Pretty simple, right? 1 new set of words every week, and then for the rest of the week, you're reviewing that set of words as well as the previous words you've learned. So every Monday, just take on a new set of words, learn those words that day, and then throughout the week, you're putting more space between each interval that you see those words in so that you're learning them and recalling them, moving them from short-term memory to long-term memory. The next week, you do the same thing, except next week you also add the text that those words you memorized last week were in to your reading schedule. And so now you can read the text that those words were found in, as well as all the previous texts you've already learnt and are already reviewing the words for as well. And this means you're able to read fluently. So the Master New Testament Greek approach is very simply a matter of learning the text, memorizing the words you need, the lexemes you need, then reading the text that those words are found in, and then going back and reading both that text and previous text again, so you get to a point where you can read through entire books of the Greek New Testament in one sitting if you wanted to, because you know all the words for them. And so that's the Master New Testament Greek approach. It's simply memorize, read, master. Memorize, read, master. Very simple. And you do that week after week and you build habits around that process and you will master the Greek of the New Testament. And your vocabulary will be sufficient so that not only will you not lose your Greek, but you will expand it and grow it. So if you're interested in learning vocabulary and you want to do it using the Master New Testament Greek system, well, you can try this out absolutely free by going to mntg.me/vocab today. And that will take you to the student edition of Master New Testament Greek. And you can get started in 1 John absolutely free today. And of course, if you're interested in purchasing it, you can do that as well. But it's free to get started in the book of 1 John. So here's the question of the day for you. What approach have you used to learning vocabulary? Leave a comment below. It may be occurrence-based, it may be by semantic domains, it may be by osmosis, or it may be some other approach. But leave your comment below and let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear how you've been learning vocabulary and how your Greek is progressing as a result of that. If this video has been helpful, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and hit the notify bell to be notified when new videos come out. And if you know somebody who might be interested in also learning the vocabulary of the Greek New Testament, go ahead and share this video with them and give them some encouragement to keep up the hard work. Again, let me know in the comments below what system you used, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, keep taking small steps to mastery. See you soon.